all the perfect plans, to do all the perfect things at all the right time, only to be met with Murphy's Law and have everything that could go wrong go wrong. Well, that's my story of my journey to get here today. Yes, you see, 4 weeks ago, I was 89 pounds and fighting for my life. But my story started a year ago. When I was first asked to come here, I was so excited, but at the same time, I started my battle with cancer. I had done a day of chemotherapy and knew that it wasn't for me, so I started looking into every alternative method that there was, anything that anyone had ever done to cure cancer. You see, I was already beyond stage 3, so I knew it was critical. I found out right away that cancer is a type of parasite. It reproduces itself. So I immediately adopted a plant-based diet and began a very hefty deparasiting process. I then oxygenated my body doing 80 hours of hyperbaric chamber and 5 months of Rick Simpson's oil. If you know what Rick Simpson oil is here in Colorado, I was high as a for 5 months. Every single month, I was supposed to be on a call to prepare for this talk, but I was so high, I could barely even sit up or even get myself to the bathroom, so it all became extremely challenging for me. However, at the end of my 5 months, I got a 100% clean bill of health. Zero cancer. They found absolutely nothing. I was perfect. So I gathered my closest girlfriends, and we took off for Mexico to celebrate. And after 5 months of just laying around doing nothing, it seemed like it would be a good time to party. However, on my 3rd day there, I was bitten 26 times by a flesh-melting spider. And there began my journey with physical pain. I was supposed to only be there for a week. However, I stayed an extra 2 weeks, and the Mayan people who are well acquainted with this particular spider were taking care of me. To them, the spider is medicine and it's sacred, and so they were helping me work through the journey of what this meant for me. I had just recently, before going to Mexico, spent a little one-on-one time with Chief Black Fox. So he is actually a First Nation indigenous person from the United States. He told me that the Lakota do not have a word for no in their language. They don't use the word no because the plants and animals don't understand this word. The trees and rivers don't understand this word. Spirit doesn't understand this word, and Creator doesn't understand this word. Only the human mind tries to understand this word. It has no place in the natural law of the world we live in, this word no. So when I was bitten by the spider, I said yes. I said yes to the medicine, and I started to look at my life and see, why was I bitten by this spider? So when I finally returned from Mexico to the United States, it was Thanksgiving. And my friends came over to see me, and they took a look at my arm as flesh was melting off of it. And they said, we're going to take you to the emergency room. You need to get that looked at. And I was like, no, I know exactly what it is. I've got it handled. But the truth is I was in so much physical pain because each one of those 26 bites had grown a root through to my bone, not to mention my flesh melting off of my bones. There was just so much intense pain that I could barely even breathe. So I said yes, and I went to the emergency room. They gave me what was, for me, an almost lethal dose of antibiotics, steroids, and anti-inflammatories. It was almost lethal to me because I was allergic to the antibiotic, and the steroid bumped it up, and the anti-inflammatory killed my own immune system to fight against it. And because this whole thing was given to me intravenously, I really had no defense against it. So this particular antibiotic is designed to damage the membrane of the infection so that it can't reproduce itself. So let's say you had MRSA, it would save your life. But in a person like me that couldn't methylate it out or couldn't get it out of my system, it stayed inside me, damaging the membranes of my cells so that my cells couldn't reproduce. So within a short period of time, I found myself living in a dying body. And each day I would have a new problem. Something new would break down and wouldn't function. And I could see slowly that I was just going to disintegrate to nothing. But I was told that I could take handfuls of nutraceuticals every day that would help my cells reproduce themselves. And so I did. But some of them were counterindicative to each other, so I had to separate them out and time them out, and it became just like a full-time job trying to get all these things in my system so that my body would keep reproducing cells and I could keep living. It was at that time that a woman was delivered to me. She introduced herself as an MD and medical intuitive. And she said that I was overcooked and that I needed to water fast myself, that I needed to stop doing everything, that my body had an intelligence and that it could come back to homeostasis if I would just stop putting things inside of it, anything inside of it. So I got a water distiller and I started water fasting. I water fasted for 10 days. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done because I already had no energy. And so I just laid there really near death. And in the first couple of days, I actually sank deep inside my body and found myself floating down that infamous white hallway. And believe me, it is the most mystical, magical hallway. And I didn't want to leave. I was floating down it, feeling absolutely in bliss, all of my pain behind me, and just seeing white light in front of me. And then all of a sudden, my young son's face came in front of me in total shock and despair. His eyes popped out of his head, and his little face saying, "Mommy, don't go." Now, I've adopted him, so in his short little life, he's already known more pain and loss than most people know in an entire lifetime. So for him, I came back. I came back into my dying body. I fought my way back, and I laid there thinking, okay, now what? And as I laid there, everything I knew about Mother Earth came to me. Suddenly, I was like her. I was toxic like her. I remembered that as a young girl, I was a scuba diver, and I lived in the Caribbean, and I used to scuba dive, and the coral there was epic and beautiful, and the fish were magnificent. But several years ago, I had returned there, and all I saw beneath the sunlit surface was death and decay and plastic and trash. So when I heard that the Great Barrier Reef of Australia had been declared nearly 90% dead, I knew it was true. And when I heard that an oceanographer had revealed that the oceans will be suffocated without oxygen by 2030, I knew it was true. And then I started thinking about my own life. I started thinking about how I was impacting Mother Earth. I remembered hearing that the microfibers from our clothing were ending up in the ocean and killing the plankton that the great whales live off of. I remembered seeing that fracking was making all our water toxic, and that when oil spills happen, they actually use toxic chemicals to sink the oil to the bottom so that we can't see it anymore. All of the things that I'd heard and known came back into my sphere, and I could see it all. And then I had to take a good look at myself. And as I lay there dying, I realized that my toxic body that I was blaming somebody else for. I was doing the same thing to Mother Earth by the chemicals that I used, by just everything that I was doing in my life, even the glitter that I was using in my company. I have an avant-garde cirque company, and we perform all over the world. Maybe the most magnificent thing that we've done is perform the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday while he sat on stage with us. I was so proud of that day. But that day we had glitter on our face, and that glitter ends up in the water that ends up in the ocean. And those chemicals and those little particles are killing life on Earth. It was a really hard vision for me to have, that I was the problem, that I was the actual problem. I could point my finger at Monsanto. I could get enraged about cloud seeding and cloud bursting, where they spray chemicals on every city around the world to alter the climate, make it rain or snow or shine or whatever they're trying to do. I could blame all of these people, but the real villain, the real culprit was me, myself, what I was doing. I needed to clean up my own act, to take a good, hard look at how I could change how I was living. Then I was told about the caterpillar, the metamorphosis of the caterpillar to the butterfly. Have you heard about this? I grew up in northern Canada, where the monarch butterflies come when they're caterpillars. And I've seen them ravage and desecrate everything around them. The caterpillar can eat up to 27,000 times its body weight in its lifetime before it decides to hang upside down, spin a cocoon around itself, and then start what I can only imagine is a very painful liquefaction process. During this liquefaction process, though, something magical happens. The very aptly named imaginal cells start to appear. Now, these cells vibrate at a different frequency than the caterpillar. So the caterpillar's old and dying immune system recognizes these cells as the enemy, and they start to attack. But the imaginal cells keep coming, and they start to collaborate and start partnerships. They communicate with each other. They join in groups, and then the groups in clusters. And soon, together, they create the butterfly. And the butterfly is a generator of life. It pollinates flowers. I started to see that we could no longer be the caterpillars here on Earth, that the liquefaction process had become, and that we must start our own personal inner metamorphosis from the all-encompassing, ravaging caterpillars that we have been consuming, to the epic butterfly, flying, spreading our wings, working in collaboration, working together, pollinating flowers. Yes, the time for metamorphosis is now. And there is truly only one person that can save this world. And that person is us. Thank you. Thank you.